Please have roll call.
Chris Delahousis. George Boris.
Here.
Herb Elliott.
Here.
Lawrence Hasek.
Here.
Chris Hrabowski.
Here.
Chairman King.
Here. We'll now hear the quasi-judicial announcement, and anybody wishing to provide testimony this evening will need to stand to be sworn in.
Good evening. Oh, this will take a while.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
After we hear the announcement, I lumped all that together.
Good evening. The matters before the Tarpon Springs Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. In a quasi-judicial proceeding, the board's function is to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Tarpon Spring Code of Ordinances. This is a legal decision regarding the application before the board. The board may only consider evidence that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues arising from the application and the applicable code sections. If the evidence demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. If the evidence demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established by the Board of Commissioners and the Code of Ordinances, then the Board of Adjustment is required by law to find against the applicant. Any and all persons providing testimony at this hearing are required to do so under oath. All persons testifying at this hearing must give their name, address, and must indicate whether or not they have been sworn for the record prior to proceeding with their testimony. All testimony and questioning at this hearing must address matters that are relevant and material to the issues under consideration based on the criteria established in the Tarpon Springs Code of Ordinances. The following is the established procedure which will be followed at this quasi-judicial hearing. First, town staff will present its testimony and evidence regarding the application first. The applicant will then have the opportunity to ask questions and cross-examine the city staff and any city witnesses. 2, the applicant will have the opportunity to present their witnesses and evidence. The city will have the opportunity to cross-examine the applicant and any of the applicant's witnesses. 3, members of the public opposing the application will be given the opportunity to present their testimony and evidence. Each person will be given 2 minutes to provide their testimony and evidence. 4, members of the public in support of the application will be given the opportunity to provide their testimony and evidence. Persons will be limited to 2 minutes for such presentation. 5, the applicant may present any rebuttal testimony and evidence in a closing statement for summary. The city will present any rebuttal testimony and evidence and/or a closing statement for summary. And then the chairperson will close the public hearing for consideration. At this time, anybody who wishes to speak at this evening's hearing, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you all swear to tell the truth on the matters before the Board of Adjustment here this evening? Okay, when you come to the podium, make sure that you speak into the microphone and you state your name, your address, and indicate that you've taken the oath. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now hear, application 1530 for a parking variance has been withdrawn according to the agenda. So we'll move on to item number 4, application 1529, request for a setback variance. First, we will hear staff's presentation on that item.
On this item, Chair, the applicant is requesting a continuance, and they're here to speak for that, on that item. So we can ask the applicant to come forward and continue the application to the next meeting.
Okay, that's fine. I just have a question, a procedural question. Is that an issue that the board would vote on, whether or not they would get a continuance?
Yes, you need to vote on it because it was currently on your scheduled agenda, and it is in the discretion of the board. Surrounding property owners have been noticed for this evening. If you wish to continue it to a date certain, no additional, and the application remains the same, then no additional notice needs to be provided by the city.
Okay.
But it has to be to the date certain, which would be, I'm assuming, your next regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting.
Okay, thank you. Could the applicant please come forward? Please state your name and address for the record, and then let us know why you would like a continuance.
Sure. My name is David Lobb. Our address for building is 504 Wideview Avenue. We're requesting a continuance because we were in communication with the previous gentleman who worked in the zoning department, and through our discussions, we were led to believe there's been other applicants because we own or purchased a more narrowed lot than what is required by the city for building now. Ours is 65 feet wide. We're now understand it's a minimum of 75 feet wide. Along with that, a new setback of a total of 25 feet has been applied. That total 25 feet is now being applied to even the more narrow lots of 65 feet wide, which is ours, which our home plan now encroaches 2 feet 8 inches into that new setback. So we asked for the variance, applied, we were denied. I just found out yesterday, so we had no opportunity or chance to really look into this, provide a rebuttal, so we would like to continue it, so we at least have a chance to continue to communicate with staff to see if there's anything to be worked out.
Okay. Does the board have any questions?
Is there anyone here to speak for or against this application?
Is there? Okay.
Let the record reflect that nobody came forward.
Okay. Does anybody here have any questions for the applicant? Okay. I guess I'll entertain a motion to either, well, I guess the motion to continue it, and if you would like to include it as a date certain, what language, do they need to specify the date, the exact date in the motion, if they're going to continue to a date certain?
You can specify the next regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting. Cheryl, do you have a calendar on you, by any chance?
I don't.
Are we looking for a motion here?
It would be the
Yeah.
24th.
I'll move,
of June.
I'll so move that we continue this until the next regular scheduled board meeting.
24th,
Which is what date?
the 24th of June.
Okay, June 24th. Next.
Whatever the next meeting is, if the next meeting
Okay.
fails.
I have a motion to continue this meeting to the next regularly scheduled time, which is June the 24th. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Could we please have a vote?
I have a comment.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd like to see a rendering of the building that you plan to build if you do come back next month, if you would.
It's in
please.
your planning division.
Okay.
It's already here.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, please, if we could have a vote on that motion.
Sure. Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hasek?
Yes,
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. This application has been continued to June 24th.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next application, number 5 on the agenda, application 1532. We'll hear staff's presentation on that application.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Matt McLaughlin. I'm a planning consultant to the city. I work for Calvin Giordano Associates. Our office address is 13535 Feather Sound Drive in Clearwater, Florida. This request pertains to a 2.5-foot variance to the required rear yard setback to accommodate a solid roof screen enclosure around an existing deck. The subject property is part of the townhomes at Brittany Park subdivision, approved as a planned development. The required rear yard stipulated in the development order is 10 feet. The site is located at 913 Aussie Court. The property contains the end unit of the 4-unit townhome building. Behind each unit exists a 7.5-foot by 16.5-foot wood deck as shown on the survey. The rear yard is adjacent to a conservation easement to the west. The deranged driving range and batting cages is located to the north. With respect to our analysis, the townhome building was constructed in 2014 with a rear yard setback of 15 feet. Each unit has a 7.5-foot deep deck that extends 2.5 feet into the required rear yard. The variance is necessary to allow the existing deck to be screened. We find that the variance being requested is the minimum necessary to afford relief, and that reducing the current depth of the deck is not practicable. We find the essential character of the neighborhood will not be affected by the variance given the open space character of the adjoining properties to the north and east and will not create a nuisance. In conclusion, we find the application meets all the city's standards of review and have no objection to the variance being granted as requested.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay,
I have a question. On the background, you have as 10 feet of setback requirement,
That is correct.
okay? And then on the analysis, rear yard setback is 15 feet.
The existing building setback is 15 feet. behind the building is a 7.5-foot deep deck that encroaches 2.5 feet into the required 10-foot setback.
That was built
Permitted through the
with
city.
a permit?
It was permitted through the city in 2014.
okay.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
If the applicant could come forward and present any testimony or evidence that you'd like the board to hear before they make their decision.
He was, yeah.
Would you like us to know, if you'd like to come forward, you could tell us any information you'd like us to know before we make our decision on this application.
Basically, he said this, just want a screened-in porch, and I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any questions for the
What's
applicant?
your name?
Yes, can you please go ahead and state your name, your address, and
All right,
indicate that you've
Kathy
taken the
Nicholas,
oath? Thank you.
913 Aussie Court, Tarpon Springs.
Okay, now,
Sorry.
are there any questions for the applicant? No. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody here to speak for or against this application? Okay, I'll open it up for board discussion. If there's any discussion about this matter? And if there isn't, then I'll take a motion in a second.
I move that we approve this motion, 15.32 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, could we please have a vote?
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hasek?
Yes.
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda, application 1534, and we'll hear staff's presentation on that application.
Thank you. Heather Erler, 2329 Indigo Drive, Clearwater, Florida, staff for the city of Tarpon Springs, and I have been sworn. Okay, this application is one of 3 tonight that the Housing Authority has put together as kind of like a group. They will handle each one individually, but they are part of the same grant application. They've received a $12.5 million HUD grant, and they want to do improvements to 4 of the villages. So the next 3 variances that we'll be going through are those variances for those villages. The request is a multi-part variance to allow for the approval of existing non-conforming building setbacks. The structures are existing. On the north side is a 14.9 foot request. On the east side, which is again South Walton Avenue, it's 25.5 foot easement or setback setback request. The south side street of Martin Luther King Drive, they're requesting a 37.3 foot setback, and the east to the rear setback would be 33.9. They also are requesting a reduction in the parking. They're requesting 34 parking spaces where 64 are required. And based on Section 2505 multifamily residential district, 15 units per acre in our land development code, the required setbacks are on the north side, a 20-foot minimum setback. The east or front side on Walton Avenue would be a 25-foot minimum setback. The south side or side street on Martin Luther King Drive would be a 20-foot minimum setback, and then the east side is a 20-foot minimum setback. And again, based on the parking schedule, the parking calculation is basically 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, and then additionally 1 space per 250 square feet of gross floor area that they're using as clubhouse and office. And essentially, they are again also asking for 34 parking spaces where the 64 are required. Walton Village was developed as a housing project to provide affordable renting property for elderly and disabled folks. The Housing Authority has operated Walton Village collectively with other properties under the Villages of Tarpon Springs. Recently, they received, as I stated before, a grant to do some improvements. They're seeking lender financing to construct major renovations to the existing buildings and associated site infrastructure, which will include bringing up the sites to handicap accessibility codes and the current building codes. Each building will undergo complete internal renovation and remodeling, including replacement of mechanical and plumbing equipment, handicap mobility improvements. The water, sewer, and irrigation lines will be replaced on the property. The handicap and accessibility improvements will be made to the parking areas, sidewalks, mail kiosks, and dumpsters where feasible. Renovations will be also made to the exterior facading and improvements to the landscaping. Basically, these buildings are non-conforming uses under our land development code. However, the financing or lender is requiring the housing authority to come forward to the board and seek these variances to basically grandfather in their existing setbacks, because the setbacks do not meet the zoning criteria. That being said, the requesting variances are based on the physical nature of the subject properties. It would be nearly impossible for them to acquire additional property to meet the setbacks at this point. This is a developed area. It's all single-family residential around them, and there isn't a way for them to acquire property to meet the setbacks and to redevelop that site in its existing form. They would lose units, and they would lose additional parking to renovate those units to meet current code. That being said, the project was noticed to surrounding, or in the Tampa Bay Times, and we sent legal notification to the surrounding property owners. Staff did not receive public inquiries on this, and there's no formal objection on this particular property. That being said, staff is recommending approval of the requested variances for setbacks as follows. On the north side, 14.9 foot. On the east side, front on Walton Street, 25.2 foot. On the south side, the side street of Martin Luther King Drive, 37.3 foot, and the east rear of 33.9 feet. And staff is also recommending the 34 parking spaces where 64 be required. The variance request meets the review criteria established in section 215.02B of the LDC.
And do you tender your report in the city file on this matter into evidence in this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay. Is there a representative from Tarpon Springs Housing Authority here?
Good evening. I have not been sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth on the matters before the Tarpon Springs Board of Adjustment this evening?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. For the record, my name is Peter Pensa. I'm an AICP certified planner with Avid Group. We're the planners, engineers, and surveyors on the project. With me are also representatives from the Housing Authority and the general contractor for the project. Staff did a great job summarizing it, so I don't need to get into a lot of what was talked about. I just want to reemphasize that we are a permitted use. The Housing Authority will continue to own and operate the facility for senior housing. We meet the density criteria, and it's been operating for decades with the existing setbacks and parking, and so we will not be changing that. In this particular site, we're actually, through the process of renovations, we're going to be adding handicap, and through a series of restriping, like you saw in your packet, we'll actually be able to add 2 more spaces besides bringing the site up to ADA compliance. With that, they're looking forward to doing some significant renovations to this property and the others, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Go ahead. You can go ahead.
Yes, sir. How many dwelling units are in this particular village?
In Walton Village, there are 30 units.
And you're asking for a total of 34 parking spaces for the 30 units?
That's correct. There's 32 existing today, and we're going to be able to add 2 more, so for a total 34.
Has there been a parking problem?
No, there has
Shortage of
not.
parking in the property?
No.
Thank you.
Once these units are renovated, how long is the life of them? 20, 30 years, 40 years?
They'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the lender financing requires them to be operated as affordable housing for at least 30 years.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
I do have one more. You're not changing the footprint of the building or the property, correct?
That is correct. These are masonry structures, block buildings. The interior will be gutted and completely replaced, electrical, drywall. Walls will be moved to make handicap accessible pathways and bathrooms and other kitchen facilities. So the block exterior will remain. There will be no additions outside, but there'll be aesthetic improvements to the exterior as well as significant interior renovations.
On the sidewalks, are they handicap accessible?
They will be when we're done.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody here to speak for or against this application?
I haven't been sworn in as well.
Okay. Do you promise to tell the truth on the matters before the Tarpon Springs Board of Adjustment this evening?
I do.
All right, thank you. Name and address, please.
My name is Steve Gourmet, 713 Bay Shore, also 227 East Lemon. And I don't believe I've ever met any of you, but I've been knocking around Tarpon for a while now. I just want to say this before you act on this one, and really I'm here because I got the postcard on the next one, which is item 7. And that's the one on the corner of Lemon and the Trail. So I purchased the bakery from the Smurlis family back in 2007 across the street. I also own the ring lot behind T-Flies. And I've really been working probably since the year 2000. My office was on Lemon Street for 10 years, from 2001 to 2010. And I worked with Renee and Joe and Rodney over the years on the development of this smart code. So I just want to call it to everyone's attention that, you know, that was a 12-year plight that basically set forth some density and new smart zoning. And I think what came out of that code was really good. And I think it was in some sense it fell short. In some sense it was really good. So I think that you have to really consider the whole picture for Tarpon before you start granting variances. I mean, my question to Tarpon Springs Housing, you know, which I've tried to talk to over the years, and finally had a very good meeting with Pat Weber back in, I think, December of 13 or something. But, you know, Lemon Street, you have a big investment in Lemon Street, you know, and put the improvements in. And there's people talk about parking problems, and there's people talk about, you know, Uber. Nobody will have cars in the future. I don't know where parking's going, but people complain about parking. And elderly people, they do need parking because they have visitors, you know. I go see my mom and dad, and the visitors are the ones that create the problems in the parking, especially when parking's tight. And it may not be every day. It may be when something's going on. And there's a lot of things that go on in Tarpon, which is great. So I'm all for a parking structure, take care of some of the parking problems. I'm not for violating the code that you guys worked 12 years to pass on variances. And I would suggest that before they went and got this $12.5 million grant, that, you know, they probably should have thought about this, right? And I'm not one for, you know, I think that's and the next one, not so much this Walton property, but the next one's very important to me on the corner of the Trail and Lemon, you know, because I'm across the street, and because what I know what the city went through for 12 years to get Lemon Street done in advance of something in the future. So stay focused on that, because when you start granting variances for those properties, you got to really look at, you know, what was the main goal. And certainly parking, density, you know, new product, it's great. Tarpon Springs has done a great job fixing up the properties throughout Tarpon, and I think you know, they're a special group, and we're lucky to have them. But I think on these types of things, that, you know, make sure you guys really look at it hard. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open this up for board discussion. Is there any discussion on this topic?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Heather, you're fairly new, but there's 30 dwelling units at this property and 34 parking spaces. In your experience, has it been a problem parking on this particular property for the residents there, do you know?
I really can't speak to whether this particular property has had an issue with parking, or actually if any of these properties have been parking. I've been here 3 weeks, so I have not heard of any parking problems. However, this is a significant reduction in what's required for multifamily. Now, there may not be the need because most of the folks who are here are elderly, are disabled, so you might be able to reduce the parking, but I by no means can give you a professional opinion on whether or not 34 spaces is going to be sufficient without having some kind of study of what's going on there out there day to day. and that information was not provided to me.
Well, based upon the testimony of the gentleman making the application, he said there was not a parking problem with the 32 spaces, so it's foreseeable. And there's been 100% occupancy, is that correct? It's been pretty well filled up? They're saying yes? So I imagine 34 will be, if anything, better than what it is now. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion?
Well, yes, I also have a concern about parking. I'm wondering, is there any off-street parking or off-site parking available when this thing fills up?
They have not provided any evidence to show me if there is a shared parking arrangement or any of that type of thing to indicate that there are parking spaces that they can utilize elsewhere. And they would need to provide some kind of evidence to that fact. I mean, there are parking areas throughout the city, whether or not you actually have right to park there, say when a business is closed, that type of thing, usually you have some type of arrangement when that happens. There's some kind of agreement signed between authority and the entity that wants to park there.
I have a, you finished?
Yeah, go ahead.
Have the residents been surveyed or any kind of a questionnaire been out to see what the response is?
I have no indication of that from the application information that's been submitted to us.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, I'll accept a motion in a second.
I'll move to approve the variance request as submitted in full.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Could we have a vote, please?
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes?
Mr. Hasek?
Yes.
Mr. Herbowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, which we've already been somewhat talking about. Application 1535. Could we have the staff's presentation on this? I mean, I guess I should ask. I mean, this is basically going to be the same presentation 2 more times?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Can we, I don't know, can we,
It's up to you.
this is a question for the
You,
court attorney.
yeah, you can actually go ahead if you wanted to adopt the previous testimony that you had in terms of the
Correct.
analysis. What I would ask you to go over in this presentation, though,
Just
is
the
the
general
specific, the things that are site-specific to this property.
What I'll do is I'll give you the general information section for what the request is, what the requirements are of the code, and then just our recommendation. So we'll give a little abbreviated one.
That's fine.
Again, this is a multi-part variance to allow for approval of existing non-conforming building setbacks as follows. The north side street of Lemon Street is a 25.4-foot setback. East rear abutting the north-south alley would be a 5.1-foot setback. East to the rear abutting the east-west alley would be a 3.2-foot setback. The rear setback, east rear setback is a 10.1-foot setback. South side street of Boyer would be 21.1-foot setback. West front on Safford would be a 13.6-foot setback. And again, the second part of the variance is to allow for 22 parking spaces where 37 parking spaces are required. Section 25.02 of the Land Development Code, Multifamily Residential District and Special Area Plan of SAP-T4C of the Comprehensive Zoning Land Development Code requires the following setbacks. North side street of Lemon Street would be a 5-foot max. The east rear abutting the north-south alley would be a 5-foot minimum or 12-foot from the center line. East rear abutting the east-west alley would be a 5-foot minimum, 12-foot from the center line. East rear would be a 5-foot minimum. South side street of Boyer would be a 5-foot max. West and front of Safford Ave would be a 10-foot max. And essentially, based on my previous testimony on this application, the application has been been noticed, and there has been no formal objection received at this point. Staff is recommending approval of the requested variance for setbacks as follows, and to allow for the 22 parking spaces on the north side of Lemon Street, you get a 25.4-foot setback. East side abutting the northeast alley would be a 5.1-foot setback. East on the rear abutting the east-west alley would be a 3.2-foot setback. East to the rear of the rear would be 10.1-foot setback. South to the side street of Boyer would be a 21.1-foot setback, and west front on Safford would be a 13.6-foot setback. And the variance request meets the required criteria established in Section 215.02B of the Land Development Code.
Do you tender your report and the city's file into evidence in this matter?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for staff on this application? Okay, if the applicant could come forward, I guess I would ask if we could do the same thing.
Yes.
If you have anything unique to this application to add, that would be good.
Okay. Again, for the record, my name is Pete Pensa. I have been sworn in. I do want to make one correction in staff's summary of the request. On the east-west alleyway, there's actually a negative 3.2-foot setback. The existing structure encroaches into the alley. It goes beyond the property line. We have a application pending, or will be submitted, hasn't been submitted yet. We're going through the process of getting the letters of no objections from all the utilities. In particular, I've got no objections from all the utilities except for conditional ones from Verizon, Duke Energy, and the city utilities, where they're requesting that we dedicate an easement back to them where the alleyway was, and then they'd be okay with vacation. What we've got proposed in the legal description that we had provided to them is a 2-foot buffer for that easement around the corner of that building, and that'll give us a positive setback at that point. But what we're asking for is, I don't know how we request it, whether it's a negative setback. I guess it would be a 0 setback on that alley since for now, and then once we get the alley vacation approved, then that would rectify that. With that, Joe Heinrich is here. He's got a few words he'd like to put in.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Joe Heidenreich. I'm the general contractor for the job. My company name is Neighborhood Homes of West Florida, Incorporated. I think Steve brought up some great points. I think we also got to be sensitive to the fact that these buildings and these villages, if you look at Walton, you look at Ring, you look at Lemon, and you look at Pine, are at the end of their life. And when you look at the buildings and you get on the insides, and we see a couple of residents here today, you really got to have empathy and compassion for the living conditions they're in right now. And what we're really trying to do is substantially improve it. I've been working with the Housing Authority since 2002. I can personally attest, since you're new and you don't have the experience, when you look at the parking spaces, we have some, there's another one coming up that's going to be Ring, that's real short on parking. Having worked there on just pretty much a regular basis, I can personally attest to the fact that I've never seen, other than maybe 1 or 2 special occasions, where the parking lots are at capacity. Most of my contact with the residents have been non-vehicle owned type tenants that take advantage of the public transportation and or walk to different areas. And the parking would be a concern. I would be concerned about that. Walton really doesn't provide any, you've already acted on it, but doesn't really provide any off-site. But when you get into Lemon, you get into Ring, you get into Pine Village, there's opportunities for people to park cars off-site. You look at Lemon, I think, Lemon's, as Steve said, is the window to the world, to the city of Tarpon. I would much rather see them make substantial improvements to this property than stay in its present condition. So,
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody here to speak for or against this particular application?
I didn't recognize you, Joe. Thank you. Joe's done a great job. They really have. My concern is this. I don't know how many they need, right? And what I do know about Lemon Street is that I've been watching it for 10 years, parked on it. When Christopher Still, our famous artist, had a show, you couldn't park on Lemon Street. The new bar that opened in the city's building, which I don't know if it's still under lease option, I kind of lost track. I go in and out of town a lot. But I know he opened, called Silver King Brewery. He had a grand opening. You couldn't park on Lemon Street. When you come down Ring, you're coming down Tarpon Ave, you bang a left on Ring to the newly opened Johnny's Filling Station, who has no parking. And all the cars are parked in the middle of Ring, which was your bypass. It used to be the old truck route, to come bang a left on Ring, bang a right on Lemon, and go out to Alt 19 that way to keep the congestion off of Tarpon Ave and Alt 19, right? So that's still a problem because as I look at my properties in that block and I look at how that's all functioning and I look at, I can only hope like you do for the great success of Silver King Brewery, which if he's successful, we got a problem. If you ever been to Lucky Dill, they got 100-something stalls. So it's going to get crazy. And if they don't need the stalls, then give 30 back to the public, or 10 of them, or 15. That's number one, parking issue. Setback buildings, they're old, you're right. They've done a great job remodeling them. They can build something new to code, to what we approved, what you guys approved. They can go up to 2 stories. They can do whatever they want. I don't know what their grant application looks like. I know the process. I'm not in that particular game, but, I think we should do something that sets the tone for what you approved and hoped that would come on Lemon Street that hasn't come because of issues like this. And as far as going back to the alley vacation, I'm glad they elaborated on that. The alleys all the way in the past, including that block of Ring, Lemon, they've vacated alleys over the years, and the city of Tarpon has vacated alleys and right-of-ways. And I can tell you, everywhere else in the country, people are trying to put alleys back because they add circulation, way ins and out. There's a plan. The density allows you to develop those alleys, right? I've been telling the city for a while that we need to just take back those alleys and clean them up because it's very valuable real estate and also very important for circulation and services and trucks. And so you have to really look at that alley goes all the way from Levis to this property at 100. And I haven't looked at what's encroaching. There's a lot of encroachments there. There's been encroachments for a year all around the city, but in that case, we really need to look hard at the alleys. And I'll be happy to come back at your convenience, and I'll show you some slides that have been floating around for 12 years because it's really important to look at all the alleys, all the circulation, all the parking, the potential for where and how big and how many stalls we should build in a parking structure, and whether it should go on that side of Alt 19 by the bayou, whether it should be on Lemon or on Main Street or at the Sponge Docks. But sooner or later, we're going to need a parking structure. If we wait long enough, maybe we won't, if everybody's driving driverless cars. But take a good look at it. I mean, I don't want to, whatever they're doing I think is great. They need to improve the buildings. I don't want to be a cog in that wheel, but I also think, if you can defer, take a look at it, I'll be happy to come back and answer any specific questions, show you my thoughts in a half hour or less, and then make an informed decision about what's going on, especially on this particular property, because the city's got a big investment in Lemon Street, and let's make sure we get it right, because that's the first project that's going to happen, and then hopefully the bakery will happen after that, right?
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to, do you have something to add?
Yes, can I address the alley?
Yeah, that's fine.
Obviously, you're not here tonight to deal with alley vacations.
I'm sorry, can you clarify for
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
record your
My
name
name's
again?
Pete Pensa with Avid Engineering. Obviously, tonight's not about the alley vacation, but it is obviously relevant to setbacks. And as you can see on the survey and on the parking plan that we provided, those alleyways are paper alleys. They do not exist. There's sidewalks, there's buildings, there's parking, there's other improvements within them. They do not provide for any circulation for either pedestrian or vehicular use by the general public at this time. And they would not be in the future, either with the apartments continuing to exist in their current state, or once a substantial improvement is done to them, to rehab them and make this a better asset for the community. That's all I got. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have a question. How critical is this alley in a case of an emergency or evacuation?
They are not roadways. They're grass areas. There's sidewalks crossing through them. In the one alley, there's a corner of a building. They provide no value to circulation at all.
Are there any other questions?
I do. I'm assuming that the grant relies upon the passing or the approval of every single one of these, right?
The grant is approved,
So,
but the lender financing that goes with it is contingent upon getting this resolved.
right, so if even just one of these were not approved, that would cause the lender to not follow through, is that correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for board discussion. Does the board have any discussion of this particular matter?
Well, concerning the grant, I thought one of our conditions were you're not supposed to take any financial things into consideration.
That's true.
So I think we should,
Just curious.
I agree. I'm curious too. I'm really disappointed in this drawing here. I'd like to challenge somebody to explain that to me. It's so small, the print is so small you can't read it. I guess I just now found out where the alley is, after all the discussion we're having about an alley. I can't hardly see where parking is supposed to be. I really don't know what this thing's all about when I look at this picture here. Good, bad, or indifferent, to me, it doesn't tell me the story.
Any other questions? Any other discussion, I mean? Okay, if there's no other discussion, I will open up for a motion and a second on this matter.
I move for approval of the variance as submitted.
I have a motion and a second. Could we have a vote, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second.
Chris?
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hasek?
Yes.
Mr. Herboski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Okay, now we're on to item number 8, application 1536. If we could have staff's presentation, please.
Okay, this is actually for two separate villages, but they're part of one contiguous application because they abut or adjoin each other. One is 400 Pine Trail Village, and the other is 305 North Ring Avenue, or Ring Village. It's a multi-part variance to allow for the approval of existing non-conforming building setbacks as follows. The north side on Pine Street would be a 23.1 foot requested setback. East or rear abutting the north-south alleyway would be 44.4 foot requested setback. East on the rear within the special area plan, the T4C portion of the property, they're requesting a 24.2 foot setback. East on the rear in the RM or the residential multifamily portion of the property, they're requesting a 25.1 foot setback. East on the side street, North Ring Avenue, they're requesting a 24.3 foot setback. South on South Street, which is Cypress Street, the residential multifamily portion of the property would be a 24.7 foot setback. South on the side street of Cypress Street in the special area plan T4C portion of the property, they're requesting a 25.3 foot setback. West front on Safford, they're requesting a 13.8 foot setback, and the side street alleyway internal to the site, they're requesting a 19.4 foot setback. They're also asking to allow for 36 parking spaces where 84 are required. Section 2505 multifamily residential districts, and the special area plan SAP-T4C of the Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code requires the following setbacks. Along the north side street of Pine Street, it's a 5-foot max. East on the rear abutting the north-south alleyway, it's a 5-foot minimum with a 12-foot from the center line of the alleyway. East rear on the special area plan T4C portion of the property, it's a 5-foot minimum. East on the rear of the residential multifamily portion of the property, it's a 20-foot minimum. East on the rear street of East Side Street, which is North Ring Avenue, would be 20-foot minimum. South and the side street of Cypress Street, the RM portion, again, that's residential multifamily portion of the property, would be a 20-foot minimum. South on the side street, Cypress Street, in the special area plan T4C portion of the property, it would be a 5-foot max. West on the front of Safford Ave is a 10-foot max, and the side or side street alleyway internal site would be a 5-foot max setback. Section 127.0 parking schedule requires a 1.75 parking space per dwelling unit and a 1 space per 250 square of gross floor area for the clubhouse and office. And again, staff is recommending approval of the variance application as follows when I get to the final page of the report. Again, to allow for the following setbacks. North on the side street Pine, 23.1 foot requested setback. East and rear abutting the northeast alleyway, 44.4 foot requested setback. East on the rear in the special area plan T4C portion of the property, 24.2 foot. East on the rear RM portion or residential multifamily portion of the property, 25.1 foot. East on the side street of North Ring Avenue, 24.3 foot. South side street, Cypress Street, the residential multifamily portion of the property, 24.7 foot. South and side street of Cypress Street, 25.3 foot. That's within the special area plan TC4 portion of the property. West front on Safford Street would be 13.8 foot. Side and side street alleyway internal to the site is 19.4 foot. And again, the staff recommends the request of 36 parking spaces. The variance request meets the review criteria established in section 215.02B of the Land Development Code.
And do you tender your report and city file on this matter into evidence for the purposes of this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff on this application?
I have a question. Are you adding any handicap spaces, parking spaces? Or are there any available now?
The applicant might be better equipped to answer that. It looks like there, in this case, there are 2 handicap parking spaces in what appears to be the Lemon lot.
Okay, why don't we let the applicant answer that, but before that, is there any other questions for staff on this presentation? Okay, if you could, give us your presentation and keeping in mind the question we just had about.
Okay. Pretty much the same as before, so I won't rehash that. With regard to the parking, yes, we are doing parking and both for handicap and pedestrian improvements. Both villages will add handicap parking. There will be total 3 spaces on the Pine Trail Village portion of the property, and there will be 2 handicap spaces on the Ring Village portion of the property.
The 36 spaces that you have now are the existing spaces?
There's 36 spaces out there. We're going to be restriping and in doing so. Some of the spaces are much wider than a normal parking space. Some of them are kind of wonky in the way they're laid out. And when we restripe it, everything will be brought to standard city code for parking dimensions, and the handicap will meet both the city and Florida accessibility requirements.
If you add then 3 handicap spaces, you got 39. Is that what the end result?
That's including it. When handicap space with the loading area is 12-foot wide plus 5 for the striped loading area. Basically, that takes up 2 parking spaces, but because there were some other spaces that were wider than needed, we're able to get a net result of maintaining 36 spaces.
Okay.
We didn't lose any parking.
Okay, are there any questions, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody here to speak for this application or against this application? Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for board discussion. Is there any discussion of this application? And if there's no discussion, I will accept the motion in a second.
Well, I guess it's me. I would move for approval of the variance request as submitted.
I second it.
Have a motion in a second?
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hasek?
Yes.
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
There's a very nice letter submitted by the Performing Arts Center Citizens for Improvement. I just want to thank them for their letter and for their comments. I think that'd be a good idea for us to review that. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item number 9 on the agenda, application 1538. If we could have staff's presentation on that application.
Okay, this is for Lot 1 of Block 7 on Grandview in Ganoy Park subdivision. The request is for a variance for a side street setback of 7.5 feet in lieu of the required 15 feet to Forest Heights Drive. Section 2502 of the Single Family Residential District, in this case it's R70A, of the Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code requires the minimum 15-foot setback. This property is located at the southeast corner of Grandview Drive and Forest Hill Drive. Based on the code authorization here is a section 215 variance of appeal and appeals of the LDC permits the board to grant variances to the zoning dimensional requirements when special conditions exist. All standards of the granting variance and is set forth in 215.02B and 215.02.5 of the LDC when proven with substantial competent evidence. Ganoy Park subdivision was approved in 1926. The subject property designated as Lot 1 and Block 2 and is currently undeveloped. The next 3 variances are all going to be on this block. So we're going to be discussing the same block within the same subdivision. Okay, so you're aware of
9,
this.
10, and 11?
Yeah, 38. It's going to be Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 5, I believe. Okay. This particular property has a width of 60 foot at its widest point. The property is a corner lot, which requires a larger side street setback, which is the reason for the request. Typically, corner lots are platted with additional width to account for the larger side street setback. However, that was not the case, and this lot has a non-conforming width less than the required in R70A zoning district. They're proposing a single-family residential unit, which it will not confer any special privilege. The entire subdivision has single-family residential units scattered without. It's partially developed, partially undeveloped. This should not have an adverse impact on any of the surrounding property owners. Again, Block 7 is vacant. There is no development, so there is no issue with this being combined as part of another lot for development. Notices were sent to the property owners within 200 feet. There was a legal notice in the Tampa Bay Times. Staff did receive public inquiries. I got phone calls on on all 3 of these properties. Basically, people saw the signs. They called in because it's the same block, and just the signs are like literally stacked. So people would just called in and asked generally about the block. So I gave them the information on all the things. There was no public objection to any of that information. They just really wanted to know what was happening on that block. Staff is recommending approval of the requested variance for a side street setback of 7.5 in lieu of the required 15 feet as it meets the review criteria established in section 2.105B and 2.1.02.5 of the Land Development Code.
And do you tender your report in the city file on this matter into evidence for the purposes of this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? All right, would the applicant like to come forward and present testimony? Thank you.
Hello, my name's Torrey Cooper, 310 Leafwood Road, Tarpon Springs. I think staff's done an excellent job explaining the uniqueness of the property, and I'm here to add any additional questions or answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody here to speak for this application or against this application? For? Yes, please come forward.
So my name is James Spencer. My address is 1421 Lonesome Pine Lane. And the reason I wanted to speak.
Sir,
I'm sorry?
Have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The reason I wanted to speak against it because it is undeveloped from the beginning of time till now. So now we're getting a development in new neighborhood.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, you can't hear me?
Up first, I can't hear a word you're saying.
Okay.
Can you talk closer to the mic, please?
Yes,
All
just
right.
speak into the mic. Thank you.
So, like I said, the reason I'm speaking against it is because there is no development there. It's been vacant since the beginning of time, and the variance, if you look at it, is 15 feet, and it's being reduced. They want to reduce it to 7.5 feet, which is a pretty drastic reduction, 50% of the available green space on the side of these properties, whatever the properties are going to be at some point. And I just think that since it's undeveloped, there's no reason for the variance other than just the convenience of a smaller variance. You know, I have no evidence.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
A question?
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, get back if you would,
Board
please.
member has a question for you.
You say you live on Lonesome Pine? Do you know your lot number? Can you get back to the mic, please, sir?
I don't know the lot number right off the top of my head, but I've lived there for 30
Well, how close are you to Highland? Do you know? How many houses?
Grandview.
No, you live on Lonesome Pine.
Yes. Well, Highland is the street that's...
Yeah, how close is your property to Highland Avenue? You know? How many houses?
300 feet.
So you're closer to Lake Tarpon?
I'm at the top of the hill. It's about an equal distance both ways.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I will open this up for board discussion. Does the board have any discussion of this matter? Okay, I will take a motion in a second.
I move we accept 1538, application 1638 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If we could have a vote, please. Thank you.
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hasek?
Yes.
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving on to item number 10, application 1539, which I'm assuming we're going to handle the same way we handled the other three. Thank you very much. We'll hear staff's presentation.
Okay. This is for Lot 2 of Block 7 on Grandview Drive. The variance request is for a side yard setback of 6 feet in lieu of the required 7.5 feet. The section is, again, 2502, single-family residential district. In this case, the R70 zone for the comprehensive zoning and development code requires a minimum side setback of 7.5 feet.
Mine says lot 2 here. Pictures lot 1.
Basically, with the setbacks on this particular lot, because of the existing lot width of 52 feet, the buildable width of the lot was reduced with the existing setbacks to 37.8 feet. So they are requesting a 1 foot reduction on either side of the existing, with the existing setbacks to allow them a larger building envelope to build within. This will not adversely affect other property owners. The lot is a valid non-conforming use and was legally subdivided. It was not been combined with any other lots. And with that, staff, there's been no other comments received from the public on this. Staff is recommending approval of the requested variance for a side yard setback of 6.0 feet in lieu of the required 7.5 feet as it meets the review criteria established in section 2.15.02B and 2.15.02.5 of the Land Development Code.
Any questions for staff? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. For the record, all the map drawings you have here are for Lot 1, and we are on Lot 2.
Yep, they are for Lot 1. I do apologize for that. They should have indicated Lot 2 on them, which is adjacent, if you go to the second page, is adjacent to the existing lot in the block.
I also do have a question. You had mentioned a 1 foot reduction, but in looking at it, I think it's 1.5.
Sorry, it is a 1.5. I do apologize for that.
And do you tender your report in the city file on this matter into evidence for the purposes of this hearing?
Yes, I do, with the correction of that this is in fact Lot 2, not Lot 1, as shown on the backup.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to make any statements regarding this application? Okay, does anybody have any questions for the applicant on this particular application?
This one I did right, that's good.
Seeing no questions, is there anybody here to speak for or against this particular application? Okay, so we'll move on to board discussion. Is there any discussion of this application? Okay, I'll take a motion in a second.
I move we approve 1539 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second?
And we'll have a vote, please.
Mr. Boris?
Yes?
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hessick?
Yes.
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item number 11 on the agenda, application 1540.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. This is Lot 5 of Block 7, Grandview Drive. The request is for a side street setback of 7.5 feet in lieu of the required 15 feet to Sunshine Drive. Again, section 25.02, the single-family residential district, R70A in this case, of the Comprehensive Zoning and Land Development Code requires a minimum side yard setback of 15 feet. This property has a reduced width of 52 feet. That's the closest point inside. So again, it's got a very similar situation, being a corner lot. It's got a larger setback. They can't meet the larger setback and still get a building envelope that meets today's standards. So littler interpretation leaves them with a limited building envelope of 29.5 feet. This will not adversely impact surrounding property owners. And with that, notice has been provided in the paper. The staff has not received any formal objection to the application. The staff is recommending approval of the requested variance for a side street setback of 7.5 feet in lieu of the required 15 feet, as it meets the review criteria established in section 215.02B and 215.02.5 of the Land Development Code.
And do you tender your report and the city's file on this matter into evidence for the purposes of this hearing?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Okay, any questions for the applicant? Is there anybody here to speak for or against this particular application? Okay, open it up for board discussion. Is there any discussion? I will accept a motion and a second.
I move we approve application 15-40 as presented.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Boris?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hessick?
Yes.
Mr. Urbowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item number 12, application 1541.
Hello again, Matt McLaughlin, Calvin Giordano Associates, and I tender my report into the city's file as evidence in supporting this case.
Thank you.
The applicant is requesting a 7.5-foot variance to the required 7.5-foot side yard setback requirement to accommodate an unenclosed carport with zero setback
I'm sorry.
from the,
Could y'all take your discussion outside, please? Hey, excuse me.
Gentlemen,
Whatever. Just give him a second to walk out the door. I don't know. All right, go ahead.
okay, I'll start again. The applicant is requesting a 7.5-foot variance to the required 7.5-foot side yard setback requirement to accommodate an unenclosed carport with zero setback from the south lot line. The subject property is zoned RO Residential Office District at 108 South Diston Avenue. It contains a 820-square-foot wood frame house with an enclosed front porch built in 1928. The applicant converted the building into an office for his contracting business. The lot has two driveways onto South Diston Avenue. It borders vacant land to the north and east, a professional office to the south, and a parking lot affiliated with the church to the west. The applicant would eventually like to create a circular driveway with improved parking in the rear yard. According to the survey, the building is set back 15.5 feet from the south property line. The subject of this variance request is the carport in the south side yard. The applicant is seeking to replace the existing 9.5-foot wide carport with a 13.5-foot wide carport to better accommodate his large commercial vehicles. The existing carport is located 4.5 feet from the south property line. With respect to our analysis, we find that the need for the variance arises from the condition of the current property and the historical location of the existing carport. Under the code, the applicant could only rebuild a 6-foot wide carport, which isn't functional. The city requires a parking stall to be at least 9 feet wide. The support post can add another foot to the width with another foot 2 feet for the roof overhang. We find that 11-foot wide carport is the minimum necessary to afford relief, which would provide for a 1.5-foot setback from the south property line. Based on the current survey, it appears that this would be in line with the existing chain link fence and retaining wall that's on the property. In conclusion, staff finds that the review criteria have been met for a lesser 6-foot variance to section 2508D2E of the code to allow a 1.5-foot side yard setback from the south property line for an unenclosed carport. That concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yes.
Go ahead.
In the letter, they mentioned 2 separate projects that they wanted.
Right. The second request has been withdrawn.
Oh, it
as
has.
they cited the setback requirement for principal buildings, and there's actually only a 5-foot required setback for accessory storage buildings and detached garages within the city, and the applicant felt he had the ability to meet that setback requirement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir, just for clarification, the original application was for a 0 setback, and now you're amending that to a 6-foot wide setback for allowing a 1-foot side yard, 1.5-foot side yard, is that correct?
A 6-foot variance to the required 7.5-foot setback.
So there'll still be a 1.5
For a
foot.
1 which would be in line with the existing retaining wall
But
and
it's for a
fence.
1.5-foot side yard as opposed to a 0 side yard setback.
That's the staff recommendation.
And that's your, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Is the applicant here to speak? Okay.
Yeah, my name is Corey Miller. Address is 4884 Cardinal Trail, Palm Harbor, and I have been sworn in. I appreciate you guys' time and consideration with this. What the staff is recommending, I would still like to ask for the zero setback, simply because, to the minimum, to help the hardship to the minimum with what we do. We're a contractor. We have large equipment, trucks, so on and so forth. Every inch counts. At the edge of this property line is where the water retention is for the neighboring property, and we don't believe that it would create any disturbance to their property in any way, shape, or form. We have not heard from them. Typically, when you don't hear from somebody, that means they do not object to it. There is a wall there and an existing fence that the wall is pretty much a water deflector because the property to the south of us is a lot higher than what we are. Another factor that comes into play is our 9-foot driveway is approximately 2 foot off of the actual structure or the office, the building, and the driveway stops, and then there's a 2-foot gap in between that the house is then approximately 16 inches below that. So even, if the driveway went all the way to the wall of the home, we would have somewhere to get out of the vehicle and stand. Now we don't. So that extra foot and a half would help with that dramatically. If you have any questions, I'd take them.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Well, Mike made it clear then that you're still asking for the zero side yard. So we'll understand then if that's disapproved, then it doesn't mean you're going to get the foot and a half.
There could be another motion.
You're going to have to,
Specify
as
one
far
or
as
the
I
other.
can tell, I think you have to put another application in.
We
If
could do another motion.
So it's my understanding that the person who makes the motion to accept can indicate what the amount of the setback is going to be. Is that correct?
Yes, you can. You can provide for the amount of setback, and you can impose any conditions on the granting of the variance that are reasonably related to what you're trying to preserve or what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
Are we ready for a motion or not yet?
We can be ready for a motion right after there's no more questions. Okay, so I'm opening it up for discussion. Thank you very much.
Did you call for I know.
Is there any, oh, I'm sorry. Are you here to speak for or against this application? Okay, that's fine. Please come forward.
My name is Jim Miller. My home address is 3742 Redwood Drive in Holiday. I'm part of the corporation that owns this structure. Currently, we have, like Corey was saying, we have a block wall, like a knee-high block wall that's right at the property line, along with the fence. Our goal was to try to mount, because it's a secured block wall, has a footer, we're hoping we could mount our posts for our carport on top of that, and then go with maybe it's a 6 or 1 foot overhang where it wouldn't protrude past over into the other property. Our trailers are, one of our bigger trailers is 8 or 8.5 feet wide. We have ladder racks on the side of it. And so we're sticking out about another 10 inches on each side of that. So we're almost 10 feet with the trailer itself to get it back in there and store it in the back of the property. It would be a lot more, to me, it would be a lot more easier or a lot more conceivable to be able to have that 1.5 foot can make a lot of difference when we're pulling in and out of there. If we can, I know staff recommended the 1.5 foot setback, which is gracious, and we appreciate that. I don't want it to interfere with asking for the 0 setback versus the 1.5. We can't afford to take the time to do that. We have to do something with this pretty soon. Our carport is falling down, and it's, we'd like to get it fixed and replaced and make the place more presentable, which we're working on now. If anybody's been by there, they'll see the difference in the place. And our goal is to keep it looking nice and for the neighborhood and everything else to make it fit right in where it's supposed to be. If we could get to zero, it would help us tremendously. If we can't, we have no choice. If we can settle for the 1.5, I don't think we want to try to go back and for the cost of another application and go through this and spend another month doing this.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
it's okay, go ahead.
It's all right. You said it's going to be an unenclosed or open carport?
Correct.
What's the construction of that? Aluminum?
We have two options. We can go with an aluminum structure, or we can go back with a wood structure. We haven't actually drawn any plans up on it yet until we knew we were going to get the variance on the setback.
What is the dimensions of that?
If we get the zero setback, our carport would be, you got the figures, Corey? I'm sorry, I didn't bring the paperwork up here with me.
Approximately be 15-foot wide and as long as the building, which is roughly 41 feet.
How many posts you going to put on that end?
Whatever's required to carry the span, you have to have so many feet in between them. If we go with aluminum structure, we probably would have to go with a minimum of 5, something like that.
Will that accommodate in the future an enclosed wall, or that's going
No.
to be? No, okay.
No, we don't want it enclosed.
Okay.
Maybe a fence at most.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Miller, well, first, for full disclosure, I ought to disclose that Mr. Miller Senior is, we used to work for the same employer, the city of Tarpon Springs. He's a former firefighter and police officer. Remember that? Right? Goes back a ways for 35 years. In any event, Jim, did I hear you say that you're able to put the posts on top of the knee wall? Is that what I heard you say?
If there is a footer underneath the knee wall, and I believe there is a poured footer, we should be able to mount the posts. We can bolt them down with anchors, proper anchors that would secure them to the top of the knee wall, and then we wouldn't have to pour any more slabs or any more footers, and it would give us, the post would be up above the ground about 8 or 10 inches, which would keep them water and everything else from causing any damage to them.
Okay.
All right, thank you. That's all I have this time.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up for board discussion.
Well, if I'm in order, I'd like to see the board approve a variance to enable the posts to be on top of the knee wall. It's not going to be any worse than it is right now, as far as the encroachment is concerned. There's another apparently 6 inches or 12 inches to the south of that knee wall that's still your property. Is that a fair statement? And you're going to put a fence there, a nicer fence? You're going to take down the cyclone? I went to see the property this afternoon, and they want to take down the existing cyclone fence and chain link fence and put up what kind of a fence did you have in mind, Corey? Okay. Well, that's my thought. I have a hard time going to zero, but a half of a foot or whatever it is now would be, if you can live with that, that would be my choice. But if the motion doesn't pass, then I'd go back to the 1.5 foot. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Is there any more discussion?
Well, I tend to agree, I mean, but why not just go to 0 then?
I agree with that.
Okay. All right, then I move for a variance, the board approve the variance request as submitted to a 0 lot line.
I second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Second. Oh, you got a second?
I already have one.
Sorry.
Third.
Mr. Boers?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Hassick?
Yes.
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Chairman King?
Yes. Thank you very much. I guess now we're on staff comments.
I think the staff did a very fine job on all the reports in the short time that she had. My compliments.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet everybody and be here. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm hoping that your next agenda will not be quite as lengthy as this one was. 10 applications was a lot to do in one night. That's all my comments. I don't really have applications yet in for next meeting, so I don't really know where we're at with what the agenda's going to be.
I wanted to commend the board too. I mean, you had 12 cases on this agenda, and I actually was planning on being here till like 10 o'clock. So I think I think this is fantastic.
I have something to, I guess, complain about. About a year and a half ago, we approved a variance for a subdivision on Anclote Road, not Anclote Boulevard, but Anclote Road, for a variance to eliminate sidewalks, so they wouldn't have to put sidewalks in. One of the reasons that they said was they didn't want to cut down all the trees. There were a lot of trees along the road, and they didn't want to destroy all those trees. We ended up coming up with a compromise. The compromise was that they would build a small sidewalk outside their subdivision and then make a opening to go for people to walk into their subdivision, and use those sidewalks and come out the other end, and they would complete that sidewalk over there. I talked to Steve about this a while back, and I guess just before he left. They did do that, but they put a gate in it. So people walking down that street going to those sidewalks are never going to know that they're allowed to go in there. Put a gate on it and a lock. Not a lock, but a post that goes into the ground. People are going to use that. They're going to have to pull that piece of iron thing up, open the gate. The gate shouldn't be there. I've never in my life seen a gate on a sidewalk. So I think that needs to be straightened out. I don't think the city should have ever allowed that to happen, number one. Number two, one of the main reasons that they were allowed to do that was because they said they didn't want to cut all those trees down. Well, it ends up they cut all the trees down anyway. So you'd go out there and take a look. So that's another thing that I kind of wonder what happens after we do these approvals. Who actually follows up with the thing? Does anybody actually follow up with it? I don't know.
It probably is something that has fallen through the cracks with the revolving door that has been the planning department. So what I will do is I'll go through it was last year, 2014.
I'm sorry?
It was in 2014, the variance.
I'm pretty sure
Well, I
that
think
it was.
it may have
I
been
actually
13.
remember
I'm not
this.
sure.
I remember it.
Okay.
It's quite a
I
while
can-
ago.
Let me do a little bit of research, and I'll contact you and make sure that I got the right property, and then let me find out what happened on the permitting side, and we'll go from there. And I'll give you guys an update once I have that information, and I know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't mean that's
Because the other
a
thing
dump, I didn't start this to dump it on you. I was going to
Sure.
dump on Steve because I told him all about this about a month ago, and now he's,
Sure. I'll pull your minutes too and take a gander at the minutes and what actually was stated, if anything was in there about that information. And then whatever you guys can remember will help fill in the gaps.
yeah,
and then-
unfortunately, I don't save this paperwork,
It's
so.
okay, I can find it. I just
Video
know if I
exists.
know it's roughly in 2014, I can find it. I
I
just
think
gotta
it's
go.
called Anclote Isles or Anclote something or
Okay.
other. Maybe not Isles, but Anclote something. And another comments too. This paperwork we got tonight, I mean, there's stuff here that you can't even begin to read that stuff. It's just gibberish. Why even bother waste of paper to put all this stuff in here? You cannot read it. It's absolutely impossible. The site plans, they don't make sense to me. I don't think they make sense to anybody. You can't, the printing is so small, you can't even see it. I mean,
Well,
why
I think
why
we
even
need to
bother
look at all of the refiling requirements here at the city, because I've come from other governments, and we don't accept what you accepted for variance application information backup. So that being the case, that's something that's going to be an ongoing discussion for us to find out from applicants if they're going to do something like that, they need to provide adequate plans that can be routed to all of the members to review in a larger size.
Another thing is, in the past, we've always had, and I hate to go back and say because in the past, but it made life really easy. There would be a drawing or a photograph or something of the proposed building that's going to go in that spot. Here, the last three we did, or next to the last three we did, there was just a red mark on the map that it didn't show what the house was going to look like, if it was going to be a house or whatever it was. And the last one that we did with the carport, I would like to see a drawing of what the carport's going to look like when it's done.
Again, the
And then
plan.
you have that as backup if they put some other kind of a carport in there.
Again, that's a filing thing. Those applications should have had additional information, but we're going to have to amend your filing criteria to kind of tighten it down so that things that are accepted actually provide the information that the board needs. Because in order to get these through, again, I'm dealing with coming in at the final hour with a lot of these applications. They were already filed. There was already discussions before I got there.
I'm not
So
picking
you
on you,
saw,
believe me.
yeah, no,
I'm
I
just
understand that,
telling
but
you
you saw
what
what I got at this point, but we need to have a serious discussion on what is actually submitted, how many copies are submitted, how it's provided to us. It shouldn't be on the city to reproduce 30 copies of something to get it for an applicant's benefit. That's something that the applicant should be submitting to us. It's done in other jurisdictions in Florida, so it's not like it's weird.
But also
Right now, I do have to clarify, though, that the code does not require that they submit any of their plans, because the Board of Adjustment does not review site plans, and you don't approve site plans, you only approve variances. So currently, the code does not require an applicant to submit an actual site plan of what they're going to build. Now, administratively, we can put things in place, and that's something that we can work with the planning department so that everything's consistent, because other boards that are also quasi-judicial boards have had similar concerns about applicants coming in and not having the proper materials. And I think if we put have the planning department put some administrative rules and regulations in place in terms of what they're willing to accept, we won't have to amend the city code to require something like a site plan.
For me to sit here and approve something, I don't need all the financial tax, the paperwork telling me about the taxes were paid and the quitclaim deeds and all that stuff. I don't need that to.
The city does, though, because we require
The
proof
city
of ownership,
says
and
it's
that's
fine, you
how
can
it
put it in there.
provides it. And-
To me, it does no good
Yeah.
to me. But it helps me make a decision if I know what this place is going to look like. And maybe I'm wrong, but I've been on here about 10 years now or more, and it's always been that way, and it makes life a little easier. And if it's not required, it may be a good idea for the applicant to put that in there so that they can convince me to vote for it. I'll tell you, I was very, very close to voting no on every one of these tonight. Because, I picked up this stuff and looked all through it before we got here. It doesn't really give me a whole lot of fuzziness. Anyway, I don't mean to pick on you guys. That's some of my suggestions.
Rules of procedure. I recall the former city attorney, which was me, about 30 years ago, wrote up some rules of procedure for the Board of Adjustment. I asked the clerk if she knew about them, and she didn't. But Heather, if you could contact Renee and see if she might know where they were placed.
Actually, the city clerk has been working for the past 8 or 9 months on the rules of procedure from all the old boards and has collected them,
Yeah,
and
well,
they're in the process of condensing.
I'm aware of that, but my file from the Board of Adjustment, going back 30 years, has been in storage, and they can't access it because of construction. But perhaps, if you ever talk to Renee, if you can ask her if there were rules of procedure, she's aware that maybe we could track those down. Once we're able to access the old city attorney files, I think I could find it. On the other point raised by Mr. Hasek, what's the filing fee for a variance? It's like $500 or something like that? Less,
$250.
how much?
$250.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Let's just put a couple more things on. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Just stack it on. Sorry.
So Herb, I'm curious, did you research that, the 10-year? Yeah, I did.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me know.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. The only way that she can do that is to file an application to the Code Enforcement Board, and it's up to the board, assuming that that's the body that imposed the fine. And then, it's actually provided for in the board. I will be in the office tomorrow if you want to give me a call, and I can go through that code section with you. Tom Trask in our office is the one that handles the Code Enforcement Board, so I can run it by him. He should be in tomorrow as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's all right, no worries.
Don't
But,
forget HRC.
here's the thing.
Oh, you
At
kidding me?
They cannot guarantee.
Honestly,
This
this
is a
back-to-back
lot
meetings,
of
I'm
different
getting no
things.
rest.
They cannot guarantee that they're going to grant the,
You too.
the request.
I guess I will
Good
be
night.
at 8 o'clock then.
What's that?
I guess
They
I'll be
can't
in then at
guarantee
8.
that they're going